Tom Rice of Community Bankers of Michigan. We are presenting with our partner, FiNet, Merchant Services. Ron DeLicero will be the MC of the day to enlighten us all on what we should be aware of on the EMV and how we can communicate this to our merchant service customers. With that, Ron, the relationship that FiNet has had with us is probably 15 plus years, if I recall.
That is correct.
Yeah, it's been a long, positive relationship. I know in Ohio we probably have over close to 60 community banks on your program. Michigan, I think you're getting up there. You started a little later, but you probably have 25 to 30 community banks. So it's a great program. We really appreciate it. FiNet's been a terrific partner of both state association and community banks. With that in mind, what I'd like everyone to do is please, if you do have a question, you can either type it in, send it to Ron, or wait till the end of the presentation, and then Ron will unmute everybody, I believe, and we can ask questions at that point. The PowerPoint presentation will be available to all. I think, Ron, you guys will be sending it out to them, and then at a future date, as you had mentioned earlier, the presentation is being recorded. Therefore, it will be available for continuous loop and viewing pleasure for all to see. With that in mind, Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, Jim, thank you for the introduction. First, I'd like to thank both Jim and Tom and the CBAO and CBM, respectively, for allowing us the opportunity to present. We always appreciate the opportunity to come on, speak about whether it be the program or industry-specific topics, such as EMV today. So again, thank you guys for setting this up. Really appreciate the partnership as well on our end. Going to throw everybody on mute here in a quick second, but I do want to, one last thing. If I happen to miss your question in chat, please let me know at the end. It's just as going through the webinar, I may have missed it. Not that I'm ignoring you, just an oversight on my part. And with that in mind, we will get started. EMV, in today's webinar, we're going to cover three basic topics. What is EMV, first and foremost? How does it work? And then the transition from that point, from this point on, where we're at, some deadlines, things we need to know, things we need to look at, both as a financial institution and for our customers as they walk in the door. So as we kind of get rolling here, oops, went one too far. There we go. What is EMV? It is pretty standard, and I heard some folks talking earlier on. I think at least at this point everybody has heard of EMV, maybe a basic understanding of what it is, but essentially in its basic root, it is a global security standard that's requiring microchips, as you see there in the background, to accompany the magnetic stripes. And we say accompany now because eventually, a couple years from now, a couple runs of distribution from now, the magnetic stripe will be replaced. EMV got its name basically from the organizations that are overseeing all the technology, Europay, MasterCard, and Visa. Those would be the primary entities involved here. And you know what we're seeing, or what this actually was a result of, if you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, even further, all the fraud, all the risk that cardholders, that merchants have from the use of plastic, the increased use of plastic, really kind of got North America and the United States, in particular the United States, to kind of jump on board with what has been happening overseas, basically in France since 1992. They've been using chip cards internationally, again, since the early 90s. And with that early start date, 2.3 billion cards have already been in use worldwide. United Kingdom, 72% drop rate in fraud just because of the use of this chip card. Your point of sale transaction, point of sale chip cards, that reduced that 72% just by using it. Canada has seen a decline, not quite 72, but 48%. And you know, it's important for us here in the States because we are the last major market to adopt this technology. Part of that was because of the infrastructure that we had. The other part was the cost. Again, earlier on the call, some folks were talking about just the issuing side and how much it was going to cost a card. That was a major reason behind the United States and frankly everybody else not wanting to kind of jump on board with that. But as a result of that, you can see here in this slide, the United States had the most reported cases of card fraud in the world, not just in North America, in the world for the last 5 years. Almost half of all the fraud in the world occurred in the United States, despite only a quarter of those transactions coming from the country. So it just kind of gives you an idea of where we're at, where we need to be as far as this new technology and what it has the ability to do to kind of help stem the tide there from the fraud and get us up to speed with the rest of the world. It's pretty easy for a criminal right now to get that credit card information and put it into that magnetic stripe. Hopefully nobody on the call has been a victim of any of that fraudulent activity or loss of identity or stolen credit card information, but I'm willing to bet, outside of myself, because I know I have been, somebody has been a victim of that, because it's very easy to take that information. What this chip is going to do, what EMV is going to do, is put that small microchip in the card, and it's going to multiply 10, 15, 20 times the amount of encrypted information that is passed through that transaction. Instead of it being roughly 2 to 3 lines of encrypted information as we're used to today, it will be an entire sheet of paper worth of information. Now, the transaction information doesn't change, but the amount of encrypted information that is hiding that information does change. And then on the back end, as those criminals took that information, stole that information, and applied it to that mag stripe relatively easily, that's going away as well, because you're not going to have the ability to duplicate that chip. And what you're seeing now, for those of you that have chip cards, or for those of you that have begun issuing chip cards, you'll see that dual type of acceptance on there. You're going to have both a stripe and a chip, basically because of all the moving parts that were involved, whether it be the issuer, the processor, the terminal manufacturer had to get on the same page, had to get the merchants working together. So we didn't want to have a rollout of either a card that wasn't going to be accepted because the terminals weren't in place, or terminals that were in place for cards that weren't issued. So the first run of all of these cards are going to have both, first, second, maybe even third runs, are going to have both chip and mag stripe on them. What does that actually mean from a transaction standpoint? As a cardholder, what do we need to know? As a merchant, what do we need to know? Traditionally we're used to either handing our card to the cashier and they're swiping it on the side of the terminal so that it's reading that mag stripe, or we're doing it ourselves at customer-facing terminals. What this is actually going to do, and again, as you see in the background there, these particular terminals are going to have a slot at the very front of it. So you're going to insert that chip card, kind of like you do a hotel room key these days, where you put it in there, the card actually remains in the terminal throughout the transaction, doesn't take any longer. It's still an 8 to 12, 15 second, transaction for it to be run. It goes through all the necessary steps, and then once it's complete, that card comes back out and the transaction is done. As I mentioned, once you insert that into the reader, the transaction is done. Terminal verifies all that authenticity. The chip also does something that the magnetic stripe doesn't necessarily do. It'll create a unique and dynamic transaction code for that particular transaction, which further adds to that level of security. Traditional transactions today, you run the transaction, that information's passed. So when you have a chip card in use, either as a card holder or a merchant, and you putting it through the system, even if that information is obtained by a criminal, they're not going to be able to do as much, if anything, with it because of the extra features that are in there. If you happen to have a chip-enabled terminal, an EMV-enabled terminal currently as a merchant, and a cardholder hands you a card with a chip on it and you try to swipe it, it will not allow you to swipe the card. It'll direct you to the front of the terminal to insert that as shown in the previous slide. Again, it's another form to help you prevent fraud, to keep you as a merchant or you as a cardholder safe and secure. That information, as I mentioned before, that's encrypted, much harder to get through that information because it's EMV, because it's code in the chip, because there's so much more there. Because it's different for every single transaction, you can't reuse it. You know, today they steal my information, they duplicate it on 500 cards, they sell those 500 cards. All Ron's information's out there, being able to be reproduced, being able to use. Very, very difficult to get a counterfeit card, use a secure microchip. You know, I'm not going to say impossible because at some point they thought it was impossible to steal the credit card information. But this is going to greatly enhance the security, both from a cardholder standpoint and from a merchant standpoint, which therefore makes the issuers more secure because of everything they've issued. They're being used by cardholders and at secure locations. So the transaction all the way around is much better. From a transitional standpoint, what we need to worry about or what we need to do is it brings new data elements that need to be passed from the merchant ultimately to the card issuers. So processors sent out a mandate basically in the beginning of 2012, middle of 2012, that said by 2013 you have to update your systems and your specifications so that you have the ability to accept and handle these particular cards as they come in. And to date, everybody complied with that, so all the major processors have now updated their networks. They can decipher, they can decrypt, they can take care of all of these EMV transactions as they occur. So from a processor standpoint, that particular piece was taken care of. As we get to the card issuers, card issuing banks obviously now have a role in this. They're responsible, you're responsible for ensuring that your cardholders have an EMV enabled card. You see American Express, Bank of America, Chase, Citi, so on, have all begun using EMV chip card, but there really isn't a rhyme or reason as to how they're doing it. So from a personal standpoint, even if you look in your wallet, and I'll use my example as well, I have a Capital One card, and then our FiNet corporate card also happens to be a Capital One card. My expiration date has come and gone. It was replaced with a standard card. Our corporate card, we just got, beginning of this week, has a chip on it. So there is a cost to it. It is coming. What these major manufacturers are doing, what these major issuers are doing, is taking their groups from a usage standpoint and rolling it out that way. But by the end of 2015, we expect 63% of the cards issued to be EMV, and that'll account for about half of the U.S. volume. Now, it's still a ways to go, and I know that we had heard a little bit at the beginning of the call that we had some timelines from an October standpoint. Even though that's going to be 600 million cards here by the end of this year, they don't expect us to reach close to 100% until the end of 2017. So what does that actually mean from an issuing standpoint? You know, if those cards aren't out there, merchants aren't going to be able to accept them, but that doesn't alleviate the need for them to have a role in this as well. And this is probably just as important, you know, for us on the phone to understand as well, because we have our customers coming in, whether it's current customers, just concerned customers that happen to hear about it on the Today Show, they see it in the news, they read it in the paper, that, you know, EMV's coming, EMV is going to be here at the end of October or beginning of October of this year. You know, what do we need to do about it? And this is where the merchant's role kind of comes into play. They are responsible for having EMV compliant equipment that works obviously from their processors so that they can accept these incoming transactions. If they don't, there will be you know, some repercussions, whether it be liability, whether it be transactions falling to a different rate for them, but there will be some steps put in place at the end of this deadline, which is October of 2015. And that's for everybody, whether it be acceptance, issuing, whatever it happens to be. That is the deadline that the industry has set. And while we've seen changes on programming, seen changes on terminals, seen changes on certain dates up until this point, the one thing that really hasn't changed is that October of 2015 deadline for the full adoption. When or if and when fraud occurs after that date, whichever entity, whether it be the merchant, the processor, the issuer, is the point of least security in that transaction, they will be held liable for any losses, for any harm that has come as a result of that. So in that scenario, if as a merchant I don't have an EMV terminal and my cardholder happens to have a chip-ready card, and I swipe it because it can still do that, and there's fraud that occurs, I'm liable because I don't have the proper equipment in there. If for some reason there is a bad program that's put into that particular terminal, even though all the processors are up to date at this point, and it's a processing issue, the processor's held liable. And if I go into, as a cardholder, a merchant, use my card through an EMV terminal, but it doesn't happen to have a chip on that card, the card issuing bank that happened to issue my credit card or my debit card would ultimately be liable for that, and then ultimately be responsible for all of those transactions that were fraudulent. If the equipment is not in place by October 1st from a merchant standpoint, that is when they would start to see that shift in liability that we've heard about, or any fraud that's going to occur. That's what's happening at that point for October 1st. Now, as a side point, we've been working with our processors. Obviously, EMV equipment is out there. We work with anybody from a merchant standpoint as they come in, as they call, as they question, whether it be informational like today or they have a specific need, to make sure we steer them in the right direction. A lot of terminals out there right now being used. A lot of them can handle EMV. Some of them can't. You always want to make sure that your merchant has the ability and has the understanding and the knowledge to obtain that correct information. And as a result of all of that, FiNet, in conjunction with our processing partner at Sage, is going to be offering new merchants of the CBAO and CBM bank partners free EMV compliant equipment. We have a tagline, and their additional details will be available throughout the summer, only because some of the terminals that we had are still going through testing. We want to make sure that Visa, MasterCard, the issuers, don't make a change on us there. But as that program begins to roll out, we will have more information with that. That is something we're trying to do to help out with the industry, to help out with our partners, whether it be through the two great associations that we partner with, or with our partners, some of which are on the phone now, to help make the transition a little easier from a merchant standpoint. Again, we know the deadline's there in October. We know that 100% capture rate on this isn't going to be obtained by October 1st, even the end of this year. Obviously, the numbers based on that previous slide said from an issuing standpoint, they don't even expect all the issuers to have cards out to us as cardholders by 2017. But there is a date set. There is going to be a liability shift here coming up at the end of October, for merchants or parties that don't have that particular amount of security in place. So whatever we can do to kind of help with that, we want to try and do that, and that's why we came up with this program in conjunction with Sage for our partners. That is probably the short version and the Cliff Note version of EMV. I'm going to open everybody back up here to ask some questions. Please throw some questions out, whether it be on either side. Answer them to the best of my ability. If we don't have an exact answer for you right now, I will definitely take note. We can get that information out to you. If there's something that you need a little more clarification on or you'd like me to expand on, please let me know. Were there any questions from the group, or does anybody have anything that they would like to mention?
Ron, Jim Sarosi again, sorry. I forgot to mention earlier on that the relationship that we have with FiNet has been expanded, and now, if I recall, you are now a preferred partner of the ICBA. So because of the work that you've done with the 2 states, ICBA has recognized what a great partner you are and how proactive you are with the merchant service program. I did want to just kind of share with everybody something I've heard out in the industry. Obviously on the EMV, you have 2 sides of it, the issuing side, the credit card issuing side, and then the receiving side. Obviously you're on the receiving side. The big issue is the making sure the merchant service, the merchants have the proper machine to be able to accept the chip card. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Are there questions out there?
Any questions? Yeah.
Well, while some folks are thinking of questions, I just want to maybe share a couple pieces of commentary that I've had. What I generally do for FiNet is more business development, so this webinar is kind of really just an offshoot of some of the conversations that I've had at a lot of our partners anyway. It's actually part of a presentation we do. And a couple of the questions that generally come up to me, because there's different pieces of information out there, you know, are all merchants going to be required by that October 2015 deadline, you know, to be EMV? And up until about 6 or 8 months ago, the answer was always yes. It was every single merchant. The only change in that right now has been service stations, just because of the customer activated type of technology they have at the pay at the pump. But everybody else, whether it be, you know, your restaurant, your big box store, your mobile merchant, are going to be required by that deadline in October. And then I usually get some type of issuing question, which I don't have a lot of information about because we're not on that side of the fence. But what I've heard from a number of our partners is, you know, we're kind of waiting to see where things shake out. We know what the rollout time is going to be, whether it be we issue credit cards from a business standpoint for our business DDAs, or it's just our debit card issuing. You know, we kind of know what the plastic cost is now from a mag stripe, and that's going to jump, you know, tenfold into the $5 to $7 range, $8 range, you know, depending on who you talk to, the numbers are all different. But one thing's in common: it's all more than what you're paying now to issue plastic. So, you know, the answer I generally give is that's just something you're going to have to look at, and how, you know, how we want to roll it out, what makes the most sense for you guys as a financial institution to roll those cards out to your card holders. But at the end of the day, that deadline's coming, and if your card holders are using your debit card at an EMV secure merchant and fraud occurs, and you happen to have a non-EMV card, you'd be the least secure option in that, and you may have some responsibility there from a financial standpoint. And that's really the best advice I can give you at that point is, you know, take your costs into consideration in your rollout plan and how many you have to, and then, you know, look at the data as it's coming up here in October from an issuing standpoint. Other than that, it's just basic questions about terminals and, you know, what do we need to do, and this company says this or that, you know, person says that. You know, there is some truth, was some truth to, you know, your terminal's obsolete, you need to replace it. You don't get it as much now, people questioning, because we're so close to the deadline. Right now, there are 2 terminals out there from a compliance standpoint. One of them's in the Hypercom family. The other one, believe it or not, is an old trans model terminal that are still good up until September. But at the end of September, that will be those will be obsolete, and we'll have to make that switch. So we would run into we would run into an issue early on where companies would come in and say your terminal is going to be obsolete. You have to switch absolutely at this point in time. So on and so forth. But those were things that were out there, things that we had to, take care of. And actually, I just see that Diane asked a question, and if it's okay, I'll just read it for everybody because it's a good question. We have a POS terminal we use for cash advances. Will we receive a replacement, or do we have to ask for it? In most cases, Diane, that's a proactive call from a cash advance standpoint. The cash advance terminals actually present a unique situation right now. In April of 2014, there was basically a universal cash advance terminal through the Optimum line of terminals. And it was pretty much did everything that we needed to do, both from an industry standpoint, and it's one of those things where everybody liked it, and then all of a sudden there was a programming issue, and that terminal was no longer going to be good. It sort of sent the industry scrambling a little bit, so depending on your processor, they may or may not have cash advance terminals ready. We've actually been working with Sage through TSYS and a few of the other back-end processors for multiple options, and this is one of those things where I said certain things change. Unfortunately, cash advance terminals keep changing, but the call we had yesterday said that they're beta testing the terminals now, and they should be ready, and I kind of did the air quotes thing if you could see me, and they should be ready towards the end of summer here so we can get those rolled out by that October deadline. But we will have more information as that becomes available.
There's another question from Leon. What about?
I did see that. I just saw that one.
Okay, yeah. Do they have a 10/1/15 deadline as well?
Leon, that's actually a very good question. We don't necessarily handle an EMV standpoint, ATM from an EMV standpoint. They actually, I believe, are a year later, 2016. But with that same thought process in mind, by that deadline, I don't have a firm date in 2016 for you, but we can find out and we can send it back out to everybody.
Thank you.
We're getting one that's already EMV ready.
Okay.
Yeah. That one.
Yep.
Are there any other questions?
Okay.
All right.
Guys, I really appreciate your time this morning. Hopefully this was a beneficial presentation. If you have any questions that you think of, or if you get the printout or the recording and you happen to see something pops in your head, please shoot us over. Either get it to Tom or Jim or directly to myself. My information is here at the end. Email us directly, and we can go from there. Actually, our product manager, who's also sitting in on the call, just kind of shot me over a quick number. It's October of 2016, Leon, for the ATMs. So it's basically a year after everything else.
Okay, great. Ron, thank you very much. Now, will everybody that's been signed into the webinar, will they be receiving an email with the presentation?
That's correct.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Again, Ron and participants, thank you for participating today in this call. Hopefully it was of value to you. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of liability. It is a risk management for the bank's decision, what they should do and when. And we're just here trying to help you make that decision. So with that in mind, Ron, thank you very much again. FiNet, we appreciate the partnership. Tom, do you have anything you'd like to
add? Nothing to add.
Thanks
everybody for joining, and good job on the presentation.
All righty, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye.